What you're about to hear now is just one episode in a bigger series, full of secrets and mystery. If you haven't followed the beginning yet, I advise you to go back to the first parts so you can understand every detail and realize how much more dangerous what's coming is. Are you ready to face what lies beneath the water? In the depths of a dark lake, amid the fog, and on a night history we'll never forget, something appeared, something the human mind cannot comprehend. And now, the world knows nothing. No pictures, no evidence. Only we saw and only we barely survived. We thought the story was over, but we were wrong, because the nightmare hasn't even begun. I leaned close to the butler's ear and whispered to him meaningfully, "By your father's life? Tell me, sir." He said it from the depths of his being, in a very refined tone, with pride, as though he had been insulted. I continued my question. "Are you sure there are no ghosts in this mansion?" "Sir? I mean, this mansion isn't haunted by the ghost of Lord so-and-so or Lady so-and-so, and they don't appear, for example, when the clock strikes midnight." He looked at me in confusion, trying to make sure I wasn't insane, then began laughing awkwardly. "Ah! The gentleman is joking." I didn't know the gentleman had such a fine sense of humor. "Ha ha!" Then he pointed toward the sitting room and said in his lofty, reserved manner, "Now, if the gentleman would kindly be seated here while you have your coffee, my master will join you shortly." The atmosphere in the sitting room was cheerful and pleasant, especially as the gentle summer breeze played with our dreams. And when Sir James joined us, amusing conversations began about many things I can no longer remember. Then he asked me about Dr. Richard, so I began telling him that story of mine. I described it vividly, capturing the atmosphere so well that the eyes of everyone widened in terror as they listened. And when I moved on to my story about the werewolf in Romania, silence filled the room, and it seemed I had completely captured their minds, filling me with a burning pride. Then I told them the story of the Nadaha, and their astonishment and excitement reached their peak. They let out cries of awe and fear whenever the events of my story grew more intense. I had mastered the art of conversation and triumphed over my former social anxiety that had nearly ruined my entire evening. Mrs. Gold leaned toward me and said, emphasizing her words, "You have faced many dangers, Dr. Ismail, and you truly are a remarkable man." Said with a hint of irritation, "Or a remarkable storyteller." I looked at her in surprise. She was jealous, truly jealous. So I still lived there in her heart. Her accusation that I was pretending filled me with secret joy. I stared steadily into her blue eyes and whispered, "My dear, you haven't changed." "What do you mean?" "I mean that all your tenderness melts away and turns into the ferocity of tigers the moment you feel that a danger threatens your heart. You're arrogant, and you love me." And just like that, I don't know how our hands met, how 10 years melted away in mere minutes, how we went out to the balcony watching the clear night. Around us rose the proud highlands of Scotland, and the night breeze whispered its secrets to us, carving our names upon the surface of the lake. Loch Ness. Behind us, in the sitting room, the others were chatting and joking, and someone put on a delicate record on the phonograph. The deep voice of Tino Rossi rose, singing in Italian about something I couldn't understand. But surely it was about my feelings, describing the beating of my heart at that moment as I could never describe it myself. "I know nothing of my life without you. It's nothing but long, exhausting nonsense. I belong to your eyes. Then you will stay with me forever?" Forever. Brother Tino Rossi was still describing what I felt in words I didn't understand, and her blue eyes were filled with tears, and there, in the darkness of the night, her features seemed softer to me, her old delicate face rising from its grave, and then she shuddered, her expression stiffened. I saw her looking far away, toward the waters of the lake. "Is there something?" She pointed in the direction of her gaze and exclaimed, "Tell me. Do you see something moving on the surface of the lake? Or are my eyes deceiving me?" I looked where her finger pointed, to the shimmering waters of the lake under the starlight, stirred gently by the breeze. There was nothing. And yet, indeed, something dark and strange, like a smooth rock, was moving slowly over the water, sometimes rising, sometimes sinking, but keeping a steady direction toward the lake's shore. I said, narrowing my eyes to see better. It's a piece of floating wood. She said, swallowing audibly, "No, you don't understand." Then she pulled away from my arm while I still understood nothing and stood at the balcony door calling her father inside. "Daddy, it's Nessie." "Nessie? What is this girl talking about? And what fault is it of mine in this fleeting moment escaping the snare of time that this brother Nessie, whatever it may be, should appear?" Sir James rushed out of the room like a man stung, a thick cigar dangling from his lips, and muttered through his teeth, "No, not at this time. Impossible." Cried confidently, "Come and see for yourself." Serms looked at the lake for a moment, then murmured, "But, by heaven, it's true. Tell," to bring the camera and the zoom lens. Mrs. White, who had entered the balcony with the others, said, "It's no use. The flash won't illuminate such a distance." Sir James agreed with her irritably, then returned to stare at the scene. I stood there like a fool, understanding absolutely nothing. So I cleared my throat and asked politely, "What is Nessie?" Sir looked only at himself, and I thought he would answer me, but he was lost in thought and paid no attention to my question. Instead, he turned to Mrs. Gold and asked, "Do you think they saw it in Urquhart? I don't think so." He scratched his head in confusion, then muttered, "But today is the 17th of July. There must be some mistake in my calculations. What is Nessie?" She glanced at Maggie in annoyance, then went back to whispering with Mrs. White. "What is Nessie?" she said, looking into the distance, the starlight reflecting in her pupils. "It's the pet name we use in Scotland for the monster of Loch Ness." The legend of the lake monster? The lunar eclipse has caused the full moon to be hidden tonight. That is the explanation. We were sitting in the living room, the smoke of tobacco filling the place, while the women began playing the game of Concan. And the scene I had lived an hour ago had shaken me deeply. It was true that it was not clear, but it was certain and left no room for doubt. Yes, it is the eclipse. There is no doubt about it, said Sir James as he scratched his head. I asked him with interest, "Is Loch Ness the largest lake in Scotland?" "No, the largest one is Lake Lomond." "And what is the story of this monster?" In mystery, Sir James narrowed his eyes and blew out cigar smoke, saying, "It is a long story." Then he tapped the cigar ash into a glass ashtray beside him and said, "The best person to tell you this story is Mrs. White. Constance, would you tell Dr. Ismail the story of the monster?" The old man, whose presence I had completely forgotten, said, "My wife is an expert on the subject. She has written an entire book about it." Constance turned over her shoulder while busy playing and said without looking at me, "There isn't much to say. The story began in the year 1933 when John Mackay, owner of the Drumnadrocket Hotel, went for a walk by the lake with his wife. And there they saw what we saw ourselves almost exactly. A dark, curved, cylindrical body sliding across the lake's surface. And of course, since two people saw it, that means it wasn't an illusion. That's why the news spread, and they named the monster the Loch Ness Monster. I said doubtfully, "But they might have agreed on a fabricated story for the sake of fame or to promote their hotel business." Constance continued the story without commenting. On the 11th of May of the same year, Alexander Rebu and his son Alastair were walking by the lake and saw the same thing swimming toward Urquhart Bay in an unusually spiral motion. "And I've finished my cards." She threw her cards on the table, declaring her victory over Maggie and Mrs. Gold. "Your playing is that of beginners, my friends." Maggie shouted in protest, demanding another round, while Mrs. Gold began sorting the cards. Constance continued her story while taking her cards again. After that, William Brodie, while in his boat, the Arrow, saw that creature 2 miles from Urquhart Castle. I asked curiously, "Always Urquhart Castle?" "Yes. Every time, this thing is seen somewhere between Urquhart Castle and Augustus." "Were there other sightings?" "Yes. It has been seen about 300 times. I whistled in amazement, and she smiled with satisfaction, saying, "The description was always the same. A long cylindrical body, its length ranging between 6 and 15 meters, swimming at a speed of 20 knots, and its swimming style is either spiral motion or continuous undulation. Some said it had a horse-like head, but I don't trust that addition much, and no one has ever heard it make a sound so far. And were they able to photograph it? Hundreds of photos. But they were all taken under the same conditions in which we saw it tonight. That is, they were all unclear images, scientifically unreliable. And did scientists try to study this matter? She said as she arranged her papers. More than once. The most serious attempt was that of the scientist Wetherell, who came from Glasgow with a full team of scouts. They spent many days waiting for the appearance of this creature, but they were not successful. In fact, Brighton Circus announced a huge cash prize for whoever could capture this monster. But of course, before you capture the monster, you must first find it. And for that reason, no one won the prize. Then came the attempts of the naval officer, Commander R.T. Gould, may God have mercy on him, and they were somewhat successful. R.T. Gould? Then Mrs. Gould? Yes, she is his widow. But what a coincidence. Mrs. Gould smiled bitterly and raised her face toward me. It's not a coincidence. The Ness monster is what brought us all together here, because we, all of us, are interested in this story. Sir James said kindly, "We are a group of friends searching for the truth, and we must find it." Mrs. White's husband is the director of the Caledonia Canal, which guards the lake. And Mrs. White herself is the author of the most important book about the monster. As for Mrs. Gould, she is the widow of the author of the second most important book about this creature. Then there is Maggie and myself, by virtue of our proximity and involvement in the events, for we have seen it many times. I even almost ran it over with my car. Your car, is it? Yes. It often leaves the lake to wander here and there, and many people have seen it doing so. I smiled sarcastically and began to chuckle quietly. Sir James said angrily, "What are you laughing at? Everything we've said is scientific fact." I hastened to apologize, explaining that I wasn't mocking their words, but rather my own strange luck, which always throws me into places haunted by ghosts, sleeping vampires, or lurking monsters. Then Bertram White spoke, in a calm, objective tone. Whether the monster exists or not is still open to much debate. All these people have seen something, but they have never seen a fully formed monster breathing fire from its mouth. In other words, there is indeed something that people frequently see in this lake, but we do not know what it is. My wife has studied all the other possibilities. Mrs. Constance said impatiently, as if she had told this story many times before. The scientists have thought of everything. They said this thing might be a mirage of wild geese, or a mass of salmon fish, or playful dolphins, or even a giant octopus. Maggie said, but the strongest possibility is the oarfish. It's a type of fish that lives here. Its scientific name is Reg. Mrs. Gould said, Regalicus glesnin. Yes, exactly as she said. This fish has a horse-like head. Its length is terrifying. What? And it lives for 20 years. It fits our description perfectly. But none of what has been said would appear in photos the way we saw it. I said absently, but I don't understand. This thing. It's not harmful by nature. I mean, it does nothing more than appear at night and stir curiosity. Sir James said, That's true. Then he gave a meaningful look and murmured, Until a month ago. What you have just heard is only one chapter of a long novel, a journey that has not ended yet, and secrets that have not all been revealed. In the upcoming parts, you will find the truth becoming more mysterious, and the events more thrilling. So be ready, because the story has not spoken its final word yet.